SEO Performance CMS Hug, we are going to jump in on a deep dive of SEO recommendations. We're going to talk a little bit about CMS and theme management because that plays a really big part for developer recommendations. We'll go through some testing and a tracking template. I'm always a test type of person. HubSpot SEO tool is one source, and there are lots of them. And then we will talk about prioritizing recommendations, and then we'll jump into the deep dive recommendations review live in our test account. We've run a test. I don't know if Eric has joined us, but Eric very graciously volunteered his website, and we will jump into his account and take a look at the recommendations. And I'll use a couple other sites to show some different situations. And then I left some time at the very end for last minute questions, but please feel free to jump off of mute and ask questions. Don't feel bad about interrupting. If you have a question about what I am talking about, then we can do that. So I'm going to jump in, just a quick introduction of myself. I've been using HubSpot since 2016 and have been building websites for over 25 years. I actually learned to code HTML and CSS on paper because I had dial-up internet and was only allowed to be online for about 30 minutes. So I am not a developer though, and I do not code websites anymore. I focus more on the front end and design. But I do have quite a bit of experience with code. I live in Texas, right about near the middle, and I'm currently the delivery lead for Aptitude 8, but it's worth noting that I was previously a freelance consultant for Maca Agency using Power Pro theme, which is one of the top performing themes available in the marketplace. And I am a HubSpot community champion. So you might have seen me around the HubSpot community or maybe on LinkedIn. Hopefully we've connected in some way. And yeah, so we're going to jump right in to CMS theme management. So this really comes down to how your website is built. So when we get to the SEO tool, you're going to see developer recommendations, and whether you can solve those will depend very heavily on how your website is built. So if you're using CMS Hub, there is an I call them old, coded template. And this would be where the developer had drag and drop capabilities on the back end. And on the front end, you didn't have the ability to make changes the way you do today. So if you have those old coded template files, the updates that you need to make would be directly in those coded template files, and you would need a developer, unless you are very well versed in those coded templates, to make any SEO improvements for performance. If you're using a HubSpot theme, for example, growth or vitality or barricade, there are tons of them. I think now it's mostly growth. If you have a HubSpot theme, then you're not going to be able to modify those coded files for performance. They should be very optimized because they were created by HubSpot. If you happen to have created a child theme, then that would give you that flexibility to overwrite those files, but you're not going to be able to do that. And likewise with a marketplace theme. So I do want to jump over, and apologies, I'm going to keep this not in presenter mode because I'm going to be jumping between tabs quite a bit and just want to make sure that we don't have to stop. So what I'm talking about, if you have a HubSpot theme, you're going to see the files here. And for example, if you have growth theme and you needed to come in and make an adjustment to a CSS file because you were having something wrong with it, you're not going to be able to do that because it's within a HubSpot theme. And if you follow this step and create a child theme, that doesn't mean that your website is now built with that child theme. So all of your website pages are still tied to the HubSpot version of that theme, and you would actually need to migrate all of your content over. So that is not a quick or an easy fix. And that's why we're going to talk about how to prioritize updates and focus on updates. The same is true if you have a marketplace theme. So I have a couple of themes downloaded here. If you're building your website with any of these themes and you needed to make changes to a file within the theme, you would need to have a child theme to override it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make those modifications directly. If you have a child theme, you will see that you have the bare minimum of files, and I don't think I have very much overwritten in this one. If you needed to overwrite something, you would want to do that with extreme caution and understanding that if the developer makes a change to that file, that you would lose access to that update. So the best thing to do if you do have a marketplace theme is make sure that you have followed all of their steps to optimize for performance, and then check with their resources to see if there are any improvements underway for performance. Many themes in the HubSpot marketplace are optimized for performance, and we'll already take that into account. If you're new to CMS Hub or you're thinking about migrating your website, it's worth pointing out that when you're in the HubSpot template marketplace and you're choosing a theme, you're going to see a lot of performance scores for themes, and they're all going to tell you that they're amazing, wonderful themes. Those tests are run on the demo site, which are usually not very content heavy. I highly recommend when you are choosing and evaluating a theme to take your time and do your due diligence. Look at their showcase examples, run performance testing on their showcase examples, and fact check. So I have seen and worked with a lot of clients who have a marketplace theme, and they're like, hey, but they said this is like 100 score for performance, and that's not the case for me. And so we're going to get into that when we get into the deep dive in terms of like how you can optimize a theme, how your content impacts the performance of a theme, and kind of take a look at that. So I kind of went through in design tools, the first three here. The other option is you could have a custom theme. And so if you have a custom theme, you more than likely worked with a developer. Hopefully you prioritize performance when you created that custom theme. If not, then you would want to ideally re-engage that same developer to work on performance. That's going to give you the more background and insight into like the theme and what can be optimized. If you need to work with somebody else, I'd be happy to make some recommendations if anybody has questions about developers who can help with performance related updates. If you are going to do any of these options, whether that's creating a child theme, modifying a child theme, I highly recommend that you work with a developer first who is very well versed in performance instead of trying to tackle it on your own, because you could end up in a worse situation than you were to begin with. The other thing worth noting is you can use the SEO recommendation tool for non-HubSpot websites. So you can run it for WordPress, Webflow, any other website that you manage. The side note to that is you can actually run the SEO recommendation tool for any website. So if you are a HubSpot partner or you are an agency or a developer and you are going to work with somebody on optimizing their website, you can actually run the scan in your own HubSpot account and have full access to those details. The biggest difference will be that you won't have the direct link to fix some of those items directly in the editor when you don't have access to that account. So that is going to be kind of the big difference, but it will help you in terms of scoping. It will give you a bigger picture. You can run it for your competitors' websites if you want to. If there's a website you love and you want to see how it's doing, you can, run all kinds of tests. Okay, so just a quick check-in as a reminder, if you're just now joining us, it looks like we've had a few more people join since I got started. I'm not able to see the chat, so if you would like to come off mute and ask a question, please feel free to do that. I'm happy to see so many of you here. And I will go into the next section, which is testing and a tracking template. So one of the biggest things, the SEO tool in HubSpot is amazing. It's going to give you a lot of insight, but it's pulling from various sources. So you want to make sure that you run other tests and that if you really are focused on performance and improving your performance, improving your SEO, you should be looking at a big picture, not just one source. And there are other tools. I will put together a resource of some of the other tools I used for this conversation. I'm sticking with Page Speed Insights because that is directly tied to Google, and then also Lighthouse. And there is a difference between them. They both run off of Lighthouse, but there is a difference in the results that you will get. And so I'm going to walk through that so that you have a really good understanding of the differences between them. Getting a perfect score. Everybody likes a 100, most everybody, I imagine. That is not necessarily your end goal. Anything even over 80 is going to perform at a level that it is not going to be a deterrent for your site visitors. So if you're scoring 84 and you're like, well, I want to get to 100, but it's going to cost you, an exorbitant amount of money to get there, it may not be worth it. You really need to evaluate the impact your performance is having on your site visitors. So if your bounce rate is in check, if you're keeping an eye on, conversion rate and bounce rate, then you may not need to make that investment. So there's always a correlation between performance and bounce rate. The worst bounce rates are sometimes because the content isn't a direct match and sometimes because of page load. And so that's just one thing to keep in mind. So Page Speed Insights, I'm going to swap over here to Page Speed Insights. This is a test that I ran for the website that we're going to be taking a look at today. I guess it would help if I also share that. So this is VIP Marketing, and Eric has graciously volunteered to let me walk through his results with you guys. So thank you, Eric. And yeah, so we're going to take a look at some of this together. Page Speed Insights. So you put in the website and it's going to analyze, and you'll get mobile results and desktop results, and you can toggle between them. What you're going to see is this performance is going to be lower than Lighthouse. And so I'm going to jump back over here and point this out. These performance tests use Google servers. They don't use HubSpot servers. So actually, Google is rendering your website off of their server, not HubSpot's. And HubSpot has a lot of built-in performance mechanisms that are maybe not always going to be accounted for. So that is why you will see some of that discrepancy. It's not an exact science. I have seen perfect scores on both sides, and I have seen discrepancies. It really just, it's servers and it's tests. It is not an exact science. So lots of variables. If you optimize for mobile, it can impact your desktop results and vice versa. So you really want to make sure that when you're looking at your results, you're looking at both mobile and desktop, and you're understanding the difference between them and the changes that you'll make, how it would impact the other. With that said, one of the things that I think a lot of people miss or don't understand about Google Lighthouse is you have this score breakdown, and it goes into what's called core vitals. So first contentful paint, largest contentful paint, total blocking time, and cumulative layout shift. These are your core vitals. And it's like, hey, well, total blocking time, that's not so great. That's like in the orange. I want to tackle that. And then you're like, well, how do I do that? This is my favorite part of Page Speed Insights. You can filter it down to just the TBT items. And then from there, you can prioritize those. So you can decide whether there is something that you can or can't do based on what those results are. And you can break it down. So instead of going through all of them, you can prioritize your efforts directly in Page Speed Insights. Now, sorry, going back here. This is Google Lighthouse, and because Google Lighthouse is using your browser, Chrome extensions, and you can see I have a lot of them, that will impact the results. So I can't run a Google Lighthouse test live in this window because you can't screen share Google Incognito. So I've got some screenshots and steps to walk through. If you've never done this before, it is a little bit of a dev tool. All you do is right click and open the dev console. And then you will choose, and you can choose mobile or desktop, and you can narrow down the categories. So you can just check it for performance. You can do, as I mentioned, you want to do that in incognito. So I'm not going to run the test, but I will walk through here the steps just to show you. So this is the console again, and then this is kind of that default settings that I just walked through. When you run your test. So after you have your, and I will show you this. So after you've created one, it will have a name here for that report. If you need to run it again on desktop, you click this little plus sign. So that will help you to create multiple tests in the same spot without having to start everything over again. Okay, so when you're running these tests, you're not just running them and looking at the numbers, you need to track those results. So one of the things that I put together while I was with Maca Agency is this performance tracking template, and I have it open here. This basically has the ability to track everything you want to know. You can modify it. So this is configured to have multiple pages on the same tab. You can do a tab per page. The most important thing, a lot of people will run their website through PageSpeed Insights and get a 100 and think that you're done. These results are per page. So if you are running your main page, it's not checking your entire website. It's not giving you a score across your entire website. You do need to test your key converting pages and multiple pages. So FCP, that's first contentful paint, and all of this, these columns here align. This is speed index, total blocking time, largest contentful paint, and cumulative layout shift. Then we've got performance, and the M is for mobile and the D is for desktop. And so all of that aligns if we take a look with the numbers that you see here. And so what you'll do is you'll run the test. You might run the test on PageSpeed Insights. You might run it 3 times in Lighthouse. You might track multiple tests across both, and you'll basically get an aggregated score. And the reason you want to do this is so that you can see how your efforts are playing out. So when you start to make those changes, especially on the dev side, you can compare the results. And you can say, okay, before we made these changes, these were our scores. After, these were our scores. I highly recommend tracking your scores and not just using the SEO tool as is. So before we jump to the next topic, I just want to show, so this is the website that we're going to take a look at today. And you can see in Lighthouse on mobile, it scores an 81, but in PageSpeed Insights, it's a 51. And that's that discrepancy that I was talking about and why I highly encourage you to run multiple tests. These are the tests that I ran this morning, and you can see the results are different. They are going to be a range. This is not an exact science. There are, as I mentioned, lots of variables. So you want to make sure that you run at least 3 tests and average those out. This is desktop. So you can see performance in Lighthouse is considerably higher than in PageSpeed Insights. Either way, this is still a pretty high performing website. But if you were to look at just PageSpeed Insights and see that 51, you would think that you had a major problem on your hand. But when you take a look in Lighthouse, you realize that you're well within a good range and you might just have a little bit of work to do. So now we are going to jump over to the SEO tool and prioritizing recommendations. So when you are looking at your SEO tool, and I will jump to that in just a minute, there are a couple things to keep in mind. One, all HubSpot accounts have access to SEO recommendations in the page editor. So if your website is built in HubSpot, you can actually access, and I can probably jump over and show you what I mean. So you can actually go into the page, and from the page editor, you can get to optimize, and you'll have SEO recommendations at a page level. So that's included with every subscription for the CMS. If you have Marketing Hub Pro or Enterprise, or CMS Hub Pro or Enterprise, then you have access to the SEO recommendations tool, which is what we're going to focus on for this deep dive. That SEO tool aggregates all of those recommendations and also does some of the performance testing. So within the page, you're not necessarily going to see, you can see crawling and indexing, mobile friendliness, but it's not really looking at performance. It's really looking at SEO. So there is a clear distinction between these SEO recommendations and the full SEO recommendations report. If you're not using CMS Hub Pro already, I can't recommend it enough. There is so much value out of having all of the tools and capabilities built in. So jumping in, there are a couple ways that you can manage this. You can check filter by impact. You can set the impact to high, the technical difficulty to low, and choose the marketer role. And that's going to help you to pick off some of the more important items that are maybe a little bit easier to fix. And that's a good way to get started. This marketer star, this is kind of what I call myself, right? So if you're a marketer and you have no code experience, you're going to want to stick to the marketer. If you're a developer or working with a developer, the developer items typically require code, but not always. And marketer star are also items that are on the fence. Those are items that HubSpot recognizes might be something that a marketer could fix, but could be something that requires a developer. So those filters here are very important when you start to prioritize. The technical difficulty is another way that you can prioritize. So you can delegate to team members based on technical difficulty. You can focus based on impact. But the number one thing that I always recommend is to start with security. Especially if you have a WordPress website. CMS Hub, you're usually going to see no recommendations. The only time you will is if your domain is not properly configured to use HTTPS protocol and your SSL is not properly configured. So in that case, it's going to look like this. It will say, make sure all pages load over a secure connection, and pages that load over HTTPS, so on. So you can see the impact is high, the technical difficulty is high, and it says role marketer star. The technical difficulty on this may sound scary because it's high and it has that marketer star, but it really comes down to just following the documentation that HubSpot has available for configuring your SSL, making sure your DNS is properly configured. If you've done all of that, then you wouldn't see this warning. So that is definitely step one. If you see this, pay attention to it and tackle that. So before we jump in, I'm just going to do a brief pause. If anybody, as I mentioned, I can't see the chat. So if anybody wants to jump off mute, if anyone has a question, I'd be happy to answer those questions now. Give it just a minute. All right, no takers on questions, no worries. We will keep going through. You can also come off mute and yell at me for going too fast, but I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for the actual deep dive. So I want to just cover some of this information. There is a recording and you can have access to the deck afterwards. So what I want to start with prioritization and the deep dive, we're just going to kind of blend these together, is when is a developer issue not a developer issue? Because this is probably the number one question that we get in the community, that I get as a freelancer, as an agency, is like, how do I fix these developer issues? And so I want to make sure that we kind of talk through that. So For right now, I'm on the workflow. I inadvertently started a scan earlier this morning because it said it would only take an hour. And so we're going to give that a minute. Hopefully it's going to finish up here. And I'm going to take a look at the workflow. So this is my former agency. We were just acquired by Aptitude 8. And so I'm managing the SEO here. This was scanned 3 months ago, and I have it filtered to role developer. So one of the top things that you'll see flagged as developer that isn't is improve page loading time. Largest contentful paint is the largest element on the page. And a lot of the times it says, reduce unused JavaScript, make sure your images are lazy loaded or preload the image. And it sounds very technical. It sounds like you need a developer. This part right here, compress your HTML, minify them. That sounds really scary. If your website is in HubSpot, all of those files are minified automatically, so it is most likely not the case. So if you're using a theme and that theme has been optimized, then you can see exactly what the issues are. So when you're looking at it, it's going to tell you which element is causing the issue. And it's going to tell you what the delay is and which page you're on. And then you can find that. Now, if you were in the actual account, and maybe that is something I can pull up and see if we have this scan. No, we don't. Then there is an option over here that says fix in editor. And when you fix the item in the editor, it's going to open that up. It's actually going to give you more detail about what the issue is and identify that item. 9 times out of 10, this largest contentful paint comes down to your hero image. So this big image at the top, you can see on this page, we have a transparent header and the image is full height. Google is actually going to treat this as a background image, and so it doesn't have any impact on LCP. But if I were to come into this page and change my layout so that it was extra small, now when I have this layout, this image is now one, it's not a great layout because it's not fitting on the page, but the image is now treated as content because it's not taking up the full above the fold area. The Google and the way that the content looks is seeing it as content. So using a full height hero with a background image, when you're using a background image, especially if you're using background video, the way that this goes all the way down to the fold, that will basically take your largest item and move it to the background, and it's not going to impact your LCP. So that's one way that you can optimize this. All of LCP, or improving page loading time, comes down to what is that biggest thing that you see on the page when it first loads. So we're going to take a look at this one. We've got a hero with a header at the top. The hero has an image in the background, and it is full height. So you can see that this item here is not going to be, that image is not going to be the largest contentful paint. Even if it were, even if you didn't have all of it optimized already, then you would want to look at image size. Is it properly sized for the viewport? Can you minimize it? Tiny PNG is a fantastic resource. It's not going to change the quality of your images. It's quick and easy and free. And you can basically reduce the file size. Now, if you see items like this, like div class equals blah, 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 and it's not giving you a lot of detail, in your version, it will show you what item that is. And it's usually going to be the largest item at the top of the page. And let me see if we just pick one of these pages. So in this case, it's this wavy background, which is causing the issue with largest contentful paint. So that is going to have the biggest impact on the page. So you have to decide, can I replace that GIF with a video to better optimize it? Do I want to use a static image? Do I need that movement? And a lot of the times when you're optimizing for performance, there is a balance between content and performance. on this VIP marketing page, I would not change anything about this hero, even if I were dinged for LCP, because I feel like the layout and the messaging and everything is very strong. And you wouldn't want to sacrifice the content, which is why your visitors are there for a tiny improvement in performance. In this case, this wavy line is not doing very much for this page. It is a perfect example of how you could fully optimize your hero area to focus more on content and improve performance at the same time. So that is improve page loading time and largest contentful paint. As a reminder, if we were working on largest contentful paint, we can come down here and take a look at what is hitting this page for largest contentful paint. So right now, it looks like the Google Font API is what is triggering the largest contentful paint for our VIP marketing website. Oh, sorry. And that, so one thing you can do in your CSS file. So like I said, if you have that child theme, if you have a custom theme, you can actually go in and load your font. This is enter. You can load that font locally and it won't have to make the call to the Google API. That's what happens with a lot of themes like Power natively. You have the option to load those fonts locally, and that's for GDPR compliance. If you don't have to worry about GDPR, you probably aren't aware of the Google Font API, but replacing your Google Font with that local install will remove the call to the API and improve your performance. And you can see it's 220 milliseconds. So take the value of that compared to the opportunity, right? And how much time you would have to spend. This is a few minutes, depending on how your theme is configured. And I'm going to go back to this first slide where we talked about theme types. If you have a marketplace or a HubSpot theme, you're not going to be able to do this. You need to have a child theme or a custom theme. So the effort it would take to load your fonts locally for a marketplace or HubSpot theme is not going to be worth the migration of the entire thing for 220 milliseconds. So that's why it's really important to understand what the impact is and how much work goes into that. The other thing is that this website is using jQuery, which is a JavaScript library. A lot of themes have now removed that. Removing jQuery for a theme or a website like this could actually be a very complex undertaking because you're basically replacing all of the code, the JavaScript code that is coming from that jQuery library with vanilla JS, which is basically JavaScript coded directly in the theme and not using an external library. The reason that we're seeing that here is because it has to call to an external source to get that jQuery library. And so that is taking time. Again, it's 50 milliseconds. So the impact is relatively low and wouldn't be something that I would prioritize as a fix. This, however, is when you have ensure text remains visible during web font load. This is something that is happening because of that Google Font API. So loading your fonts locally would take care of this potential delay. And then we've got a couple other things with some unused JavaScript. So there is some developer opportunity. This is where you're going to see things like Google Tag Manager pop up, Google Maps, some of the HubSpot code. And a lot of that you won't be able to do anything about unless you decide that you don't need Google Tag Manager. So this is the balance, right? What is important? What do you need? When we're talking about a developer issue. So if you remember, we're talking about improving page load time, largest contentful paint. And here is the part where you don't need a developer. This is the part where a marketer could work on this. So avoid enormous network payloads. So basically that means that you have an image or a file that has not been optimized. And this image, so let's see this one in our background, we could take this image, we could download it, and then we could go to tinypng.com and we can upload this image. And I don't know if you guys can see my file manager while I'm doing this, but I'm apparently, here. So now we have this 3 megabyte JPEG, and once they optimize it, it should reduce it considerably. Once it processes. I don't know, it's taking a little bit longer. That is a pretty big file. So TinyPNG will only let you go up to 5 megabytes. So if you have images larger than that, you need to resize them first. And one thing I will say about this image, this is pretty accurate in terms of the size it's being used on the website. So I wouldn't reduce the overall dimensions of that image. It says 6,261 by 3868. That's going to account for Retina. That's going to make sure it looks good on all device sizes or browser sizes. What you could do, if this loads, so bad example. So one of the downsides of doing this live is nothing happens as quickly as you would like. So what TinyPNG is going to do is optimize this here. So we saved 55%. So we took a 3 megabyte file, dropped it to 1 megabyte. You can click here. It's going to download that. You can re-upload it into your HubSpot files, and you have now taken care of largest contentful paint without needing a developer. So you can do that for all of these items. And what will happen as you start optimizing these and replacing them in your files and you rerun the test, you'll see that they'll drop off and maybe some other images will surface. It's always going to rank them from the largest to the smallest. So this is your biggest opportunity as a marketer to improve your largest contentful paint. This is, I would say, the most tedious part of SEO and the part that nobody really wants to do. Marketer, developer, nobody really wants to sit there and optimize images. There are batch image optimizers. There's a ton of tools out there, depending on whether you need a free tool or a paid tool. If I were going to invest for this website, I would rather spend the time to optimize these images than try to make minor fixes to the code. Make major fixes to the code to have minor results with the potential savings here. These images and optimizing them will have a much bigger impact than doing some of the heavier lifting. They are a little bit more tedious. You do have to go through and optimize them all. Haven't looked at all of them, but depending on how they're used on the page. So let me see if I can find an example of something that might be hitting. So I don't know. These are all in the background. So you can see that with the black overlay, these images, I don't know how well you guys can see them, but they are very hard to see that it's actually changing an image here in the background. Those images could probably be reduced in size and quality quite considerably. These images here, if they are popping on that report, they can also probably be reduced down quite a bit. So you have the opportunity to reduce the overall size, but also optimize them, and that will help tremendously on that. So I'm going to go back and hang with me. Let's see. Oh, still in progress. Okay, well, that's not good. So I have also got, so this is an old scan as well. This is the Maca Agency website, and this is built with Power Pro theme. It is fully optimized, but you can see that there are still 270 performance items, and I do have it filtered by developer. And you can see that there are still a lot of recommendations. I'm doing this because some of these are false flags. So a lot of times you might see something and Google or Lighthouse or HubSpot is going to say, hey, you have an issue with total blocking time. It's blocking the page by 426 milliseconds. You can minimize the thread work or reduce the JS execution time. And it's just like all this very technical, developer-centric terminology. And it seems like something that you can't fix. Um, a lot of these items, and for this theme in particular, it's actually a false flag in terms of there isn't actually an issue with TBT. It's not actually blocking it. What it's looking for in the code is optimized in a way where it's done differently, right? So all of these tools are just tools. They're looking for very specific criteria on the back end to give you a metric to go off of. And if your developer has coded it in a more modern way, or a way that is a solution that doesn't have that exact trigger that they're looking for, then you could see these false flags. And there is actually not going to be an impact. The test result will have an impact, but when you actually are on the page is not going to have that blocking time. So that's a little, it's a little meta. It's a little hard to kind of wrap your head around that, but there is that potential. And having worked with this theme quite extensively, I can tell you that was probably one of the biggest questions. And I had to really learn that in and out. So before we jump in, I started with, what is developer and not a developer? And we just very briefly talked about prioritizing. We're about halfway through the deep dive. So I want to just take a few minutes to actually go through how to prioritize some of these, and we can go through them together. So one of the things that I like to do, especially when you have 680 pages scanned and 582 recommendations, is actually to go technical difficulty and set that to low. Impact can be any of them. And then let's take out developer and marketer plus. And now I'm left with the lowest hanging fruit. And I believe in the snowball method. I think that if you roll a snowball down the hill, it's going to turn into a massive snowball, and you're going to have an avalanche. So sometimes when you have a huge daunting task, and I've heard and seen accounts with like 49,000 recommendations, as long as you've taken care of security and you don't have any security concerns, if you can start to tackle some of these, like your SEO impact is high, so increasing your word count. There's 12 pages where you could improve your word count. This has a demo site in it, so there's a lot of lorem ipsum text. So definitely opportunity to improve content there. Being able to go through and check these off and see that number go down, work through them. Look, shortening your title, shortening your meta description. HubSpot has the AI tools built in. So if you are in your account, you can click view pages. And then on the right side here, it's going to say fix an editor. It'll open that page directly to your meta description, and you can actually generate an AI version. It's going to show you the character count. I can jump over here. It's going to take you directly to this box, and you can say like, hey, generate me a meta description. Now I'm going to tell you, I have not generated a meta description one time that does not exceed the character limit. So my recommendation is to shorten it and figure out how you can get that there. If I had any suggestion for the HubSpot team about these AI meta descriptions, would be that it forced it to hit that limit so that you didn't have to worry about it. But unfortunately, you do need to, if you're using the AI, you do need to make sure that it's not going to trigger you to be over that character limit, and you can modify your information. So I'm just going to take all of this out, and you'll see that when you change it, it's going to tell you that you're within the limit. So once you save that and republish the page, if you were to rerun the scan, that one would drop off. So it's going to give you your meta description here. It's going to tell you the character count. You can work on shortening them. You could probably go to ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a meta description with 155 characters or less, and rewrite this and paste your current meta description in, and it would probably give you that exact specifications, and you can get those updated pretty quickly. So again, going through some of these, especially the ones that are high impact, pages that are missing meta description, Maybe you can tackle some of the low impact, like shortening and making your anchor link more descriptive. Those are the things that you can do as a marketer for your SEO, not necessarily performance, that will start that snowball down the mountain. And it's going to start to take things off the list and you're going to see improvements. You're going to be able to check that by page as well. So this is relatively new. I don't know when it rolled out, but I really like that you can do this by category or you can do it by page. So what I would recommend is find these low hanging fruit items, start tackling them. And when you go through and you say, hey, one of those pages, maybe it's the blog, that's a really high converting page for me, and I really want to optimize that. You can come over to pages and type in blog, and you can find your page for the blog, whichever one it is. This one has a lot. And you could then look at the total number of recommendations and go through that at the page level. So I'm going to pick a different page that has more recommendations. So this home one template has more recommendations, and you can see that the impact is high, and it basically gives you that same information as the filters on the main SEO page when you're doing it by category, but it's all for this specific page. So you could fully optimize a single page. Whether that's your home page, your highest converting pages, your landing pages are a fantastic candidate for this. If you do have landing pages, it's going to come up most likely. If you're using a subdomain, it's going to come up separately. So make sure you have that. But you can go through and take a look at all of these at a page level. So you can figure out, again, it'll have that fix and editor. You can open the page and you can go through and tackle everything for a specific page. So that's how that snowball works. You start with something easy and then you focus in on a page, and all of a sudden you gain some momentum and you're starting to chip these off. What I will say is I don't recommend, there is an option to hide this. So if you've taken care of it, I've seen some users hide the recommendation as they go. But if you do that, it does hide it kind of permanently if you rescan. So you would have to go in and make those like visible again on your next scan. So the better thing to do would be to create a cadence that you're going to run the scan, create your priority list of how you want to tackle things. And once you have hit a certain number of those, or you reach that new day, then you run your scan again and you can compare your metrics. If you want to, you can keep track of pages scanned and total recommendations. Just keep in mind that your SEO report is a snapshot in time. So this was scanned a month ago. If I've added new pages or made improvements or modified content, these numbers will fluctuate and you're not going to see that reflected here in the SEO tool. You're going to need to rescan the whole website in order for that to be visible again. So I'm going to check one more time. Oh, it's still going. I'm so sorry about this. So I was really excited. VIP Marketing had a ton of pages and recommendations that were really great examples. And I scanned it a month ago, and then I ran the test this morning and saw some changes to the page. And I was like, it's going to finish in time. It only took an hour last time, but it's looking like it's taking quite a bit longer this time around. So I'm going to stick with going through the Mocha Agency website. So this includes the Power Pro theme demo pages, and that's why there is a ton of recommendations. A lot of them are SEO related because there's placeholder content. So the other thing you can do, if you don't want to just filter by impact, you can also filter by category. So if I wanted to work on mobile experience, I can start to filter that down and look at this. This is really important. I love this one. This is the perfect example of, it probably should say marketer star, because you don't necessarily need a developer to fix this. It says, make sure mobile users can easily click on each page element. If you've configured your website in a way where you have a social icon that is like 2 pixels by 2 pixels big, then it's not going to be big enough for your finger to press on. So when you're thinking about your website and mobile experience, you want to make sure that when you reduce down, that your icons are actually tappable. So if we were to switch this over, and we're going to go, where is my... Maybe it's not showing. Here we go. So we're going to switch this over and look at it on an iPhone. So this is an iPhone. You can do this using Chrome developer tools. You can use it in the HubSpot page preview. You can open it in browser stack or whatever cross-browser testing you want to do. But you can see here the icons are all, they have a good amount of spacing to each side. They're roughly the size. See how the cursor changed to be like a tappable area? So when you're using the developer tools, it's going to show you what it looks like to be tappable. So if these were closer together or even just a tiny bit smaller, then they wouldn't be mobile friendly and tappable. So that's what it means when you have to have tappable items. So if you have links in your menu that are too close together, those can trigger. It happens a lot with like footer links. Sometimes your links are too close together or not spaced enough, or you're using a very small font size. All of those things could trigger this. Make sure that mobile users can easily click on it, and you don't need code to fix it. They should be 48 by 48 pixels. That's about your fingertip. And all of those are things that can be fixed by a marketer. If there are limitations in your theme preventing you from changing the size of items, that's when it would take a developer. But most of the time you have that flexibility and it's actually content related. So mobile experience is a good thing to prioritize. It looks like everything is running really well on mobile for this one. If we take a look, sorry, quick time check. So we have about 8 minutes left. I'm going to keep going through a couple more of these. And then hopefully be able to see the chat. If you guys have questions, we'll do a quick Q&A, and then we can do another one to dive deeper into these examples or other examples if you guys are really into this and want to keep going. Okay, so we have, okay, so good, sorry, got a little distracted. So we have all of our mobile, we've gone through that. Now we probably want to take a look. So performance is where you're going to see a lot of the developers. What I like to take a look at next is actually user experience and look at this. So page layout shifts. So cumulative layout shift is something that I see flagged a lot. It is flagged as developer, but 9 times out of 10, it's your content or how you have your content on the page. And I like using Power for this because it has some features that, if they're not implemented correctly, can create a layout shift. So what are we talking about with cumulative layout shift? It means that there could be an item on your page that isn't loading. Let me get out of here. So when your page goes to load, if it doesn't have, and see how this button flashes, right? So let's do that again. So when that button flashes, this button here doesn't have an explicit height and width set. So the browser doesn't know how big of a space to leave for it. So that is cumulative layout shift. It's causing the button to render in the space after, instead of leaving the space for it before it renders. And you see that everything else on the page stays in the same spot. Another instance of that could be, and let me see if I have this on here. Obviously, I haven't been to it in this browser yet. So this is Power Theme, and there is a typewriter feature. So here we have Power Theme, and then it has a series of words. This would not cause a layout shift in itself. But if you're building it on the page, and I come in here and I change this to Jennifer is really cool, and I make it longer, it could actually, that might not even be long enough. It could make it go drop to another line. Now let's see. Yeah, there we go. So you see that. So it went from 2 lines to 3 lines. So it's having to shift the content on the page, and that could trigger cumulative layout shift. If you don't have this line break here, so that's another one. If you're just using typewriter and you have Power Theme Jennifer is really cool, it's going to automatically do that. And the browser recognizes that the content is shifting while the page is trying to load. So all of those little things, typewriter effect, some animation on scroll, some of those things could trigger a layout shift. So those can be improved on the content side. They don't necessarily have to be on the blog side. The other thing I want to point out and why I like this example is these are actually knowledge base results. So if you have a knowledge base in HubSpot, if you have your blog in HubSpot, it's going to scan all of that. And there's actually nothing that you can do for your knowledge base articles. This is the perfect example of saying, okay, I can't improve this, so I'm going to hide this. This isn't actually an issue. It's set up this way on purpose. Might be a good option for this, or it's not relevant to the selected page. So I can't have any control currently over the design of my knowledge base. So I'm going to choose it's not relevant to the selected page, and I'm going to hide that. So you can hide those results so that they don't come back. And then if you needed them back, now that I have one hidden, you can do show all hidden recommendations, and then that would unhide what you have. But all of these recommendations, so if I go back to this page view and I type in frequently, oh, it's not gonna, did I do that wrong? Frequently? Interesting. So you used to be able to type any part of the string, but I guess because it's in Help Center, now it's not in the URL. Okay, so you can actually, you'll have to know the page name, but any of these pages, any of these recommendations, if you have a knowledge base, go in and exclude them. Probably should have mentioned this at the beginning when you were prioritizing, but you can actually go in and hide all of these because you're not going to be able to make modifications to that. And that's going to bring that number down. The other thing to check for, and I don't have a screenshot of it, and I don't think it's in any of these accounts, is that you want to check, let me see, for, it is called, I'm talking, look here, confirm the correct pages are blocked by your robots.txt file. So if you have pages blocked in your robots.txt file, that's going to exclude them from search. If you do, it's going to flag them here. If you want them to be that way, then you would want it to alert you of that, and it's not something wrong that you need to fix. So I would highly recommend, if you have this, verify that everything is correct and then hide it. That way you're not having to go through, especially if you have internal stakeholders, you don't have to worry about going through and explaining that every time. Okay, so I broke my word. It is 10:59, 11:59 if you're Eastern, and I didn't leave a lot of time for questions. So I'm going to swap this over here and stop my screen share. If you have questions, please feel free to come off mute. If you have been commenting in the chat, I'm trying to find it, but can't. Here we go. No, participants. Well, this is not helpful. Gonna have to get with our team. Oh, here we go. I found it. Yay. Okay, so in the last minute that we have left, is it freezing for anyone else? Oh no, froze. Okay. Yes, it's going to be recorded. I will send out the video hopefully by tomorrow. And then if you guys want to do this again, I'll try to send a survey out in the recap. I know we just barely scratched the surface on this and the deep dive, and I had to talk really quickly. If you have a specific, if you want yours showcased, send it to me. Ideally, we can do it in your account so that we can actually go in and fix things live. That would be awesome. But I'm open to doing this. I try to have events every quarter. We can do SEO for as long as you guys want to do SEO if this was valuable. If you have a specific question, we can touch on that topic. I can also bring some developers in to go into more detail on some of the developer items. Just let me know what's important to you guys. And we will end it there for today. Thank you all so much for being here. That was hopefully a lot of fun for you too. And yeah, see you next time.